Hello and welcome to the Germany Medicine Stories podcast. May listening bring liberation and lightness to your healing journey. Please note that nothing that I or any of my guests say here is or should be misinterpreted as medical information or advice. These are personal stories, not prescriptions. Okay, hello everybody. It has been quite a while since I recorded one of these podcasts, so hopefully I can remember how to be articulate and interesting for you. And it's been a while because I had a kid. I had a little boy. He's actually 6 months today that I'm recording this. And yeah, I've just been really enjoying not sharing anything about it online, which is very, sort of in contrast to previous years where I've shared everything about my life. There's just something that has felt really right about and necessary for me to keep everything private. And yeah. I know people are interested. I mean, some of you probably don't care at all, but some people are interested in, my pregnancy and birth and postpartum. And, obviously there is a lot to share and a lot of thoughts on my end about all the things. But yeah, for now, I don't think I'm going to share. Although I am in the middle of writing what's turning out to be a very long piece for Substack, sort of just like I don't know. I mean, it is personal in a sense about my birth, but not really. It's more just like a general commentary, like a sort of a check-in with how I think about birth now compared to 5 years ago when everything that I shared about was birth related. And surprise, surprise, my beliefs have changed a lot. And so, yeah, I kind of want to like publicly articulate that. So anyways, if you're interested in that, make sure you're subscribed to my Substack. Hopefully it won't take me too much longer to finish, although there keeps being more things to add. So anyways, today's episode is motherhood themed because I'm going to talk about my experience with mastitis once and twice with clogged ducts. A little bit of context is probably necessary for the stories. Mostly just the context of like being a first-time mom and just the absolute wilderness that is. And yeah, you, as everyone says, like you just can't appreciate until you're in it. Just what an astonishing feat it is, right? To have been pregnant, which for me was very challenging, and then give birth, which is also challenging, and then like meet this human who you now have to like figure out how to look after and love and breastfeed and also recover from birth. And also not really get a lot of sleep, like all at once. It is so crazy. Yeah. And it's also all new, right? So all these things together really create like a soup in which conflict is just easy to have. So anyways, this first story about mastitis began in a Whole Foods parking lot. So I don't know, I was probably like 4 weeks postpartum, 5 weeks postpartum, and we were going on like a first outing with the baby. And he had fallen asleep in the car seat. And we had just borrowed a stroller from my husband's brother because we hadn't gotten a stroller. And we were just like, well, maybe we'll like borrow one and see if there's something that we use. And so we borrowed his, and we had the same car seat as his. And so we were trying to use the like car seat attachment for the stroller. Now his brother had actually never used the stroller because their first baby was due like a month after ours. And so we were the first ones to like test it out. And it turned out that we didn't have the correct attachments to like put the car seat, lock it on the stroller and just, walk around with your baby perfectly asleep in Whole Foods and come back and it all be dreamy. That's not how it turned out. Basically, we were in the Whole Foods parking lot, like, so sleep deprived. And he's asleep, and oh my gosh, he's, preciously keep him asleep as long as possible. And we take him out and we're trying to like figure out how this whole thing works while he's asleep in the car seat, trying to keep him asleep. Anyways, we realized that it's not working out. And, you know, we're starting to have a little tiff, Matthew and I. And we give up, and I'm just going to stay with our side of the car, and Matthew's going to go into Whole Foods. So I'm sitting there nursing. He's woken up and is crying by this point, and Matthew is first like folding up the stroller to put it back in the truck, and as he's like pulling, I didn't see it happen, but he's pulling it apart, and somehow like the kind of like basically just metal bar of the like adapter thing like flings up and like whacks him right like at the top of his nose really hard. And so he kind of like comes to me and tells me this sort of like stunned, and I'm like it's not really registering for me. I'm like, okay, I don't really care, like go in and get our groceries, like I have a crying baby, I want to go back home. So anyways, he goes in, he comes back out, and I can like, now I'm kind of like realizing he maybe like it hit him in the face harder than I thought. And on the way home, he's like, don't talk to me. Like, no, I'm trying to just like apologize for being a little stressy in the Whole Foods parking lot. And, he's normally very amenable to this type of conversation. And he was like, I just please stop talking. And so then in that moment, I was like, oh no, like, is he concussed? Is he okay? Is he hurt? Which, okay, in and of itself, I don't want my husband to be in pain or be hurt, but like that, it was more the consequence that was going to have on me, because at this point I was like so reliant on him, very much still recovering from birth, and really trying to like catch up on sleep and needing him to be like on it, so that I could, get rest as much as possible. And so this kind of like feeling that he might not be okay, the person who's like holding it together so that I can be somewhat okay to look after this little baby who's fully dependent on me, was like, oh my God, absolute crisis. Oh no, what are we going to do tonight? What if he can't like get up in the night when I need him to get up to bring me this or do that? Like, oh no, he needs to be okay. Like, what if he's not okay? There's no way I can be okay. There's no way the baby can be okay. And so I think that was actually the conflict shock moment for me, was when it just suddenly, like this horror of how the night was going, which I was already kind of having a lot of like feelings about nighttime and needing to be prepared. And now an already tenuous situation felt like I can't do this. How am I going to survive without him being okay? I need him to be better as soon as possible. And so then I spent the rest of the day sort of like ruminating and, checking in. Are you concussed? Like, do you need to have a nap? What do you need? How are we going to, how are you going to be okay so that I can be okay and our kid can be okay tonight, overnight? And yeah, so, I'm ruminating on this all day. And then he's got like a huge bruise on his face and a big headache. And maybe he was a little concussed, in reality, but anyways, he pushed through, all was fine. The night, I don't know, just blurred in like the rest of them. And I woke up in the next morning and was like, and checked in with him again, and he was feeling better than he was the day before. And so I was like, okay, it's probably fine. We're going to continue to make it through this time. It's okay. And then shortly afterwards, I was like, wow, I must have like slept on my boob funny or something, because it's really hurting. And then I don't know how long after I clued in, I was like, oh no, this is, I think, mastitis. I started to get a fever, my head started really hurting, just like all the awful feelings of having mastitis, which is just particularly awful because you also have a newborn and you haven't slept, and they're demanding, and it's not very easy to rest. Anyways, but it was immediately obvious to me what had happened, which was, I had this nest worry conflict the day before. So mastitis would just be the term we would use when someone is experiencing the symptoms of a nest worry adaptation, while breastfeeding, because obviously it amplifies the discomfort and intensity of the healing phase, because you're actually using the breast for its physiologic function to feed another human being. And so there's just like more going on, and it's more painful and consequential than when you would normally run the program outside of pregnancy, or outside of postpartum. And we wouldn't call it mastitis if you weren't breastfeeding. But it is just a necessary program. And so this adaptation, the whole purpose is, there is an injured nest member, and I need to, nurse them back to health as quickly as possible. And so there is, tissue proliferation going on during the conflict active phase to produce more breast milk. This is the evolutionary, context. And then once you go into resolution, for me, once I realized actually Matthew's okay, he's not like, irrevocably concussed and no longer going to be like a functional father and husband. Once I felt that, I went into resolution, and now this excess tissue, no longer necessary. I don't need to nurse him back to health anymore. It needs to be broken down. My experience is mastitis. Okay. And so, yeah, it was really obvious to me what had happened. And that was just helpful. With everything else going on, I was definitely able to just sort of like surrender to the mastitis without like adding on a whole bunch of extra fear and panic, which would have been very easily accessible for me had I not known GNM, because I was just like, okay, this makes sense. I see why this has happened. I was only conflict active for, less than 24 hours. This isn't going to last, a really long time. I just need to let this process unfold and not make a big deal out of it. And that's what I did. I did nurse like predominantly on that one side during the day. And, I did my best to not do a lot, as much as you can in those early weeks. And yeah, it went away. And probably by like the end of the day, definitely by the time I woke up the next morning, like by the end of the day, I'd moved through like the intensity of the fever and the chills and everything. And then by the next morning, I was totally fine. So that is the mastitis story. And so in the breast, there's another adaptation that is possible, and that is affecting the milk ducts. Okay, so the nest worry affects the glands, and then we have the milk ducts, which it's a different germ layer and a different type of conflict. It's a separation conflict, and often you'll hear the emotional tone of this one described as like a torn from my breast conflict. Okay, so maybe someone has died. In my case, you were just afraid that someone has died, but it also could go the other way, right, where you want separation. But in my case, it was the fear of separation that was causing these two cases of clogged ducts that I had. So, panic or concern or like irrational thoughts about your child's well-being are I think, fairly, common among new mothers. For also some context here, I think that the nestway program, the one that caused the mastitis, that was the first time I had run that adaptation before in my body, I'm pretty sure. But in this case, with the ducts and this separation conflict, I know that I have run that program many, many times before, okay? In the exact same part of the breast, on the same side. And I already knew before this pregnancy and then this postpartum time, like what the tone of that conflict was for me. And it was, I think it probably started when I was, very young. It was related to my sisters. So I'm an eldest child, and I was very concerned with the well-being of my sisters from a young age, and, took being an eldest child very seriously. And so, an example of where I'm very sure I was conflict active as a child would be if my sisters and I were to get in a fight, or they were to get into a fight, or my parents would get into a fight with them, and someone would be sent to their room, or they'd run away to their room. I would become very irrationally concerned that whoever was in their room was just like dead, like was just gonna stop breathing or something. Like I've gotten like so worked up that it was just game over. And so I would like sit outside their rooms, like listening for them to move around or to breathe, or like I remember once like putting a note under the door, just like trying to get some kind of response so I could be like, okay, they're alive. And there's other situations how that would have played out, in sort of fear that my sisters had just like keeled over when I was young. And then in sort of subsequent years, like the person that I could have this feeling, this rumination about would change over time. So definitely my husband, there'll be I can remember like distinct moments of being like in the house and he's in the garage and just being like, oh, he's been a while, like he's probably just dead out there, like I can't hear anything. I'm like trying to like hear if he's moving and I don't hear anything, and like, oh, he's probably just dead. Or he worked quite a dangerous job for a while, and so also when he'd be gone at work during the day, I'd be like, oh, he's probably just being electrocuted or something. Like not consistently, it's not always on my mind, okay, but it would just occur. And also what would then follow these like little periods of rumination, because sometimes it would last a little while, let's say, would be like extreme sensitivity in the kind of bottom left corner of my right breast, like so painful to touch, which would have been me going into the healing phase of this separation conflict that I've just been in and out of conflict activity with over my life. But I never would have, like, it never was like a symptom, that I was concerned with. It was just like the thing that I would definitely notice was this like real soreness in one spot, like a super bruised feeling. And I never labeled it or experienced it as a clogged duct because I was never nursing before, right? I was never actually actively producing milk that could get clogged on its way out of the body. Until now. Okay. So the first clogged duct I experienced was like 2 months postpartum. And it was, we about 2 months postpartum, we left Canada and came to England. And while we were on the flight, it was very easy. He just, my son slept the whole time, pretty much. But I remember one point, I was like holding him and he'd been asleep for a really long time and Matthew was asleep. And I was just like, what if he's dead? Like just suddenly I was like, I haven't really felt him breathe or move in a long time. And what if something about like being up in the airplane and being really up high, like what if something has happened and he's dead? And I'm like, I'm trying to like, okay, I can't feel him breathing because he's kind of like wrapped up in this swaddle. And then I'm like trying to like, grab his hand and make him grab me back. And he must have like taken it. I had probably woke him up accidentally trying to get him to breathe, or like for me to visibly, feel and see signs of life. And obviously he was absolutely fine. But this like kind of just a moment of panic, oh my gosh, is he okay? Is he breathing? Just kind of like put me back into conflict activity, back onto that track, that like compulsion to be concerned about this. And I remember that lasting like quite a few days where I was like kind of consistently like, oh my God, it's like he's asleep on me, but I haven't like felt him breathing. Like, is he okay? And then like holding my hand there. I'm sure, mothers, have felt similar, had similar thoughts. Maybe like 2 or 3 days after we had got to England, after we, kind of got through the hell of like jet lag with a newborn baby, and things had calmed down a bit. I just kind of like, I talked about it with Matthew. I'm not sure. I might have mentioned to him like that moment on the plane where I just kind of freaked out. I just sort of like let it go. When I went to bed, I was lying in bed and I noticed it. I was like, it's really sore. And there was like a big lump. And I was like, I do not have the capacity to deal with a breast adaptation right now. I was like, I'm so jet lagged and so tired. Like, please, no, like I don't have this in me. And then I was up like, ruminating about not wanting to have this symptom. Anyways, then the next morning I was like, okay, I think this is not mastitis. Like it feels very different. It's a clogged duct. Like there is like a big lump, and when he nurses that kind of like goes down a lot, but it's still there. Like I could tell, and then I was hand expressing. I could just, very clearly see, that it was clogged. And it took me kind of a few hours of like thinking about it on and off to like put it together that, okay, yes, I had just been very concerned that my son was not breathing and was dead, and that, oh, interesting, this is actually in the same part of the breast of all the other times that I've had soreness, and being concerned that other people in my life are just suddenly not breathing and are dead, and that this wasn't a new conflict for me. Yeah, I had just relapsed. I had just stepped on a track, but I was experiencing the symptom differently because I was now nursing. Okay. I think I hand expressed a fair bit, and I nursed my son on that side a lot. And, after a day or two, it resolved itself. So that's that story. And then maybe like a month later, I had a clogged duct again. It was less intense this time. And what had happened was the day before, we were in this room, our bedroom at my parents' house, and my son was lying on the bed, and I had turned around, and Matthew was also in the room, and I had turned around for like no time at all, and I had turned back, and he had like picked up the duvet or the sheet or something and pulled it over his face, and he had spent a lot of time like playing with fabric while we were watching him. Like he loved doing that, but he would always like be moving it around. Like it'd be on his face, but he'd be clearly playing with it, and I was never concerned. I'm like, they're watching. But in this moment, he was just like lying there flat, like with it over his face, and was like completely not concerned, and was just lying there flat. And I was just like, in that moment, like, oh my God, he's not breathing. And like ran, and even though I knew like, okay, obviously he is breathing because he's not dead. Like it's been 10 seconds since I saw him last. And lunged over and pulled it off. But like there was a lot going on. We were like probably on our way out somewhere, so I didn't even like say anything to Matthew. I just like pulled it off and was like, and then like kept going with the day. And then that evening, because I'd been like thinking about it, just in the background during the day, like, oh my God, like I gotta watch him all the time because he could just cover himself. Like, how am I going to stop him from just suffocating? And I mentioned it on a walk that evening with my mom, and she was so like, oh, whatever, like completely didn't like, empathize with me or like understand or get involved, with buy into my panic, let's say. She was like, oh, he can't suffocate like that. Like, just a thin little piece of fabric. And I was like, no, he can. You don't understand. And anyways, and then the next morning, I saw him do the same thing again, but Matthew was the one watching him, and I think Matthew was like, that's funny, like he stopped like, pulling the fabric off of his face, like he's just leaving it there. And I was like, yes, that happened to me yesterday, and I've been ruminating about it. And anyways, we had a whole conversation about it, and I was able to just like, break my isolation, feel that there was someone else who understood and who was also like being watchful over my son and him not pulling the fabric over his face. Anyways, had a resolution. And got a clogged duct again. So that time the symptom was less intense, and I was even more like, oh, I've done this before. Like I've experienced this adaptation. Not only have I experienced it many times before, but I've also now experienced it while nursing, and I kind of just know that like it's not a big deal. Like it's going to just resolve. It's not a lot of conflict activity. And also it was just another reminder to like be conscious. If I catch myself going forward, like, oh my God, is he breathing? Is he alive? Which is just very easy to get into that line of thinking right now. That like I need to talk about it, or just like consciously let it go or whatever, unless I want to end up with another clogged duct again. Just kind of like a little, flag in my mind, like pay attention to that rumination and don't let it get out of hand, because, it's not very fun having a clogged duct. I mean, for me, it was much less painful having the mastitis, but hopefully those stories are clear. Of course, many women have experienced these symptoms, and my like iteration of like what the content of the conflict is specific to me and maybe very, very different for other women. But the point is to, pay attention to the pattern. So when you get mastitis, when you get a clogged duct, these are both resolution symptoms. And it's going to, follow something, like you've let go of something, you felt relieved about something. And so to look, in the hours, in the days before, and it's not like the conflict is like the biggest drama of your life. I wasn't consumed by any of these things like nonstop, but they were just kind of like always there looming, percolating in my consciousness until I let them go. And then went into the healing phase. Those are my stories. I'm back. I've spent a lot of time this week recording a whole bunch of episodes of different people, and yeah, it's just so fun and such a reminder of like how awesome GM is, and just how much I love this work. And so yeah, expect more podcasts coming out regularly, and also for another round of Sherlock to open soon, probably like beginning of October. Yeah, thanks for listening.